All right. Well, welcome to the Tuesday workshop. Had an interesting call yesterday with the guy Santiago from Argentina, and he joined the community. Super excited about it because one of the things he does is he connects startups with South American um, South American talent, particularly with finance and accounting talent.
Oh,
Yeah. And they are a startup as well, which is kind of fun. So anyhow, he's super. So if you see him in the community, give him a shout out. I spent 45 minutes or so talking with him um, yesterday because he hit me up on LinkedIn right after he joined up in the community, and he may or may not show up today. I don't know.
okay.
All right. Well,
Like in the video or just viewing?
on the weekly workshop call, I told him to
Gotcha.
join up.
Okay,
Also
nice.
recommended he invite people. He's really super excited about the concept. So
Nice.
if you find him in the community, say hello.
Definitely.
Will do.
All right. So the topic today, the thing that was swirling around yesterday, this came off of a call with Ryan when we were working through uh, the sprint to get his skincare line launched,
Mhm.
was talking about reaching people in your target market and algorithms and social media and all that stuff. And then Paul and I were chatting yesterday, and he added some more information to that. Because we were talking about mindset, I think it was. And the note that I had here is the thing that is unspoken is the block to moving forward. Because Ryan was talking about mindset and how he knows he knows he wants to post, he knows he needs to get his face out there in the community, but it feels like he's got this mental block. Like quicksand was one term, or the other term was like looking through a forest. It's a dark forest. You know the path is there. You know all you have to do is put one foot in front of the other, but it seems like an insurmountable thing, which I'm very familiar with that feeling. So we open it to the floor uh, for someone to add context.
Yeah,
Like
that's
the
one of
thing
the
that's holding you back?
Well, it's more like just limiting thoughts, I think, with
Mm.
regards to, can I do this? What'll happen if I do this? How will I be judged if I do this? Will it work? Sort of those are all, I would say, thoughts that I've had in my head. And as Jason and I were talking about this, as I was doing it, because I've done some stuff. Still though, like one of those things when you're like swimming, like when you get to a pool, you're young, or maybe it's your first time in the water and you're like, oh, I know this is going to be something that isn't going to kill me or maybe be even fine. But right now at this moment, can I do this? And then typically, like once you get in the water, you'll quickly find out that, you're not going to die probably. And, and after a while you get good at it, and then you can swim and stuff like that. And sometimes you'll be even better as a swimmer, who knows? But those are the feelings that I've been kind of wrestling with regards to getting my face out there, creating this content. And it's funny because, like anything, it looks easy when other people do it. They do it well. But when you get to it yourself, you're just like, oh, well, what do I do? And then sometimes the outcomes are you're good at it, or maybe you're not. Maybe you have to, do more to practice. But as Jason said, it's just literally putting one foot in front of the other and doing it. And I think that's a mental block that I've been that I've been wrestling with lately.
I just started a book this morning called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And it's a great book. And it actually talks about this this concept that you're bringing up is like the what ifs, I guess. Like well, what if it works? What if it doesn't work? The thing basically being in your own head. And I mean, it talks about like, well, if you don't care about anything, then you're basically a sociopath, right? So you need to give an F about something, right? Um, Basically the premise of like the beginning of it that I've gotten out of it so far is you need to give more of an F about doing what you want to do anyway, and less an F of what people are going to think or what the end result is. You have to love the journey more than you're desperate to get to the destination. You have to give less Fs about what people are saying it's supposed to look like and more Fs about enjoying where you're at in the process and going for it anyway, regardless. And you're not going to and this is like that I'm in my own head a lot. I mean, I mentioned this to Jason yesterday in a polo. I was like, I have ADHD and pretty bad adult acne, and I really want to be on my podcast. And the ADHD comes into play because I fidget a lot, and with that comes face picking. And so it makes it like exponentially worse, right? And I want to show my face, but I'm constantly like today, I'm not wearing any foundation or cover up or anything. I'm like, you know what? Nope, nope, nope. I'm not doing it today because I'm like, I'm not going to cover. It's less about like covering up what you don't like and less about. So he talks about, sorry, I'm all over the place right now. He talks about how if you focus on wanting to be happy, you're never going to be happy. And what he means by that is a happy person doesn't have to look themselves in the mirror and say, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy. You know, like you don't have to like talk it up. A wealthy person doesn't have to prove to anyone that they're wealthy. A successful person has nothing to prove that they are successful. So when you want to do this, you have nothing to prove to somebody that you want to do this other than just going for it. And you don't have to prove anything to anyone. It's just a matter of going for it. And I mean, that's kind of what I'm working on doing too. I'm trying to get out of my shell. I'm working on, because I do want to kind of be a life coach. I don't like that name for it though, and I don't like the connotation with it. So I want to kind of be some kind of variation of it. And I'm not completely clear on that yet, but I'm kind of getting clear in my own headspace. And so it's kind of just like doing it anyway, if that makes sense. Like, I know that's easier said than done though, but I don't know if that makes any sense. I guess what I'm trying to say is don't worry so much about what other people are doing or what they're going to think. Embrace the fact that if you crash and burn, you'll learn so much more than if you hadn't. And the only regret that you will have later on, you're not going to regret if you went for it. You're going to regret if you didn't, because you're always going to be wondering what would have happened if you had.
Right. No, yeah, I agree. And I think the part about like, what will other people think, I think is the biggest trump for me at this point.
Mhm.
But to that, it's like, as if you had said this yesterday, it's like, yeah, fuck what everybody thinks. You know what I mean? Like I just do it. And the funny thing about it is that I had created this TikTok for my skincare line, and I created 2 videos just right off the bat. I was like, just rip the Band-Aid off. And they were just me talking about why I'm doing what I'm doing and all this other stuff. And yesterday, I told Jason about it. And so he went into my TikTok and looked, and I hadn't even looked at it since I'd made those videos because, again, I was just like, I don't know, kind of embarrassed and stuff like that. And so I didn't even bother like tracking it. And then Jason looks at it and he's all like, oh, you got a pretty good amount of views here. And I was like, what do you mean? And so the first video had like 800 views. The second video had 500 views. And then I got like 5 followers out of it. And I was just like, oh. And my experience with something like that is I was on Instagram and I created this page for this podcast that me and my friends were doing. And the page didn't like really take off at all. Right. It was just us making content and nothing happening. And so that was kind of what I was going off of, like, oh, how is TikTok going to be different? But it was. And Jason and I talked about why it would have been different in other channels like I could be working with and stuff, and other channels that I ended up joining. And it was really encouraging. But yet to that point, as you were saying, like, might as well just do it, because what if I didn't?
Yep.
I wouldn't know. Yeah.
There's a point that was made in I think it was like chapter 2 of this book that I started. I'm listening to on Audible because reading my brain doesn't, yeah, ADHD. Yeah. But one of the things that he mentioned is when you go for something, when you really put your heart and soul into it, there are going to be the people who are proud of you, but you're not going to ever be successful without also making some people ashamed of you. So on the one hand, you're going to make someone proud who's like wanting you to succeed, but to other people who are the naysayers, they will be ashamed of you, and you're not going to be successful without somebody being ashamed of you. And so almost embrace it. Almost embrace the idea that you're going to make someone ashamed, but it's because you're doing something important, and it's because you're doing something that you love. Like how many people people who are non-religious talk about people who are very Christian being sheeple. There are people who are ashamed of me for speaking about how much I love Jesus. I love Jesus and I love my swear words. And there are people who are ashamed of that. But you know what? That's okay. That's okay. I kind of embrace that at this point. I kind of smile and laugh it off because, doesn't Jesus teach us not to judge people, and they're judging me because I sin differently than them? You're always going to make someone ashamed. So when it comes to what people think, the people who are thinking negatively, I don't know, maybe see if you can, I guess somehow see if you can turn it into fuel. Because the people who are going to appreciate you are going to appreciate your authenticity and are going to appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to just go for it. That's where you're going to make the people who are going to be proud of you, they're going to be really proud of you and grateful for you for making that step, regardless of how vulnerable or nervous you feel about it. And that's the internal dialogue I'm trying to tell myself all the time too.
Right. Now, I think I agree with you in much of that. And I think for me personally, it's a little different because I feel like it's not even really about what other people think. It's just, as Jason and I were talking about, it's just literally in my head. I guess I'm in sales. So it's all about your self-talk, right? Like what you're telling yourself. And sometimes, and other people I think would do this as well, is once they get into a thought, sometimes the thoughts will start to spin into a vortex, kind of go out of control. And then next thing you know, you have one thought and it turns to 20,000 other thoughts. And then I think from at that point, it can become a little paralyzing. And I think that's what I'm contending with, because it's weird, especially now since I took a look at that TikTok and kind of track where it was going and things like that. I was like, okay, well, at the very least, no one's talking smack about it. It's just me. It's literally me, saying all those things that I just said earlier and having to get past it. And I think once I do, it's fine. It becomes fine. It's when you, again, jumping in a pool and you haven't really swam before. And then you jump in and you're like, oh my God, I'm drowning. And then someone just tells you to stand up. Stand up. And you're like, oh, there you go. Okay. It's not that bad. I think that's what's going through my head.
Gotcha.
I don't see that there's such a thing in the real world as non-judgmentalism, Ryan. There's only judgment or suspended judgment. And that goes in both positive and negative directions. So you might meet someone who says internally to themselves, well, at first blush, this person doesn't really butter my biscuit. But then they hang around a while and they say, you know what, I'm just going to see if I can get to know them a little bit better, and maybe I'll come around to them. And sure enough, they do. Other people judge the opposite. They'll say, I don't like this person at all. but I've got to work with them, or I've got to, be in company with them. So I'm going to do my best. And then, they end up liking you, right? Other people say, "Oh, I love this person," right off the bat. Yeah, and then as they find out things about you, they sour on you, and on it goes. There's no such thing as a non-judgmental human being. They're just substituting one set of values for another. But they're still making judgments, right? The people who argue the most vociferously for the loudest for the amoral existence often make very moral judgments about other people's behavior, to the point that Naomi made, right? That, you have no right to tell me how to live. Now let me tell you how to live, right? It doesn't make sense. And it just goes back to the reality that mankind, encompassing both male and female, is a moral agent. Cannot escape it, cannot change it, never will, never have. Always going to be there. So the way I look at this, and this is way easier to say than to do, is that it's not a question of if I'm going to be judged. I am going to be judged. Period. Now, obviously, positive judgment feels better than negative judgment. And that's where to minimize the amount of negative judgment that I have to deal with, whether it's about me or just people judging other people negatively in general, because it does have an impact. I find filters very useful. And the majority of negative feedback that anyone ever gets belongs in the filter of unimportant, because most negative feedback you're going to get is going to come from people who haven't got the gall to come and say it to your face. Or better yet, the tact to give you a constructive negative feedback, right? I didn't like this, but here's why. And here this would be if I had my dithers and or my druthers and you were to change something, this is what I would like to see. The rest of it is just is on the spectrum of trolls to people who just need something to kvetch about. And it's, to me, that's disregard it, throw it in the trash can, don't ever look at it, don't bother with it, don't address it. Except for, as Jason and I have talked about, you do need to online have some way of responding. And usually the best way to respond is to say, "I'm so sorry to hear that you weren't happy, would love to have a face-to-face chat if you're open," and they never answer it.
Because they don't want to be held accountable.
Of course they don't. The internet gives them the anonymity to spew their venom. You call them on it in a constructive way, they'll disappear. You'll never hear from them again.
So
Or they'll
wrapping
further
this,
debase themselves.
yeah,
Sorry,
wrapping
Jason.
this. No, you're great. This is a good topic. A couple things that stand out for me on this is, number one, the issue of what other person of what other people think, and this roadblock, this mindset of where it feels like quicksand, or it feels like, I could just move the ball 1 inch forward today, but it seems so difficult. It really is in all of our minds. It exists in our head. There's nothing external stopping us. And so it's in our head, and it is a common experience to all of us. Except that one of the things I do kind of take note of is that there's perhaps a bright part of this, where when we have that thought, I think it's perhaps a signal to us that we are not a self-absorbed narcissist, because we do have some feeling of what do other people think, and how are they going to respond, and all sorts of stuff, which I understand is directed towards ourselves at some point in time. But the people who really can just say, "Hey, F you, I'm going to do what I want, and I don't care what you think," that's not a great attitude. But
No.
I do think there's something that stands out for me as well in this. There's a lady who talks about this is a video I saw. She's sitting in this beautiful camper that she decked out. It's like one of those, camper van things, sitting in the middle of a forest. Back doors opened. It's a beautiful lake. Side doors open. It's the forest and her food out there. And she said, I often sit in my camper van. I think I should go out. I should get out. I should go out of this and walk around in nature. And then she said, and then I asked myself, whose voice is that? Because oftentimes the voice that says we should is not our voice.
Yeah.
So she advocated for changing the language to asking two different questions. Do I need to? So whenever it says I should, I need to get out of the van and go outside? No. The next question is, I want to get out of the van and go outside? No. Well, then I don't know whose voice says I should, because it's not my voice. Either if I want to, I need to, then I should. But until then, I shouldn't. And it gets, I think, to this roadblock. And Ryan, you and I talked about this roadblock where if you're working on this project, you need supporters, you've got your thoughts, but you need additional input, you need potential customers, you need surveys, you need feedback. The only way to do that is to get people to know about your project. And so I need to get my voice out there. Yeah. I should. I want to. Nope. But I need to. And that's where I think sometimes this voice inside our heads becomes so self-defeating that we allow some nebulous thought about something that has not happened to stand to reduce our chances of success, because it stops us from doing the very thing that we need to do to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I often wonder for myself, it's a big question that I ask. I go, who exactly am I afraid of? And what are they going to do to me? When I published my book, I was terrified. And Paul probably remembers a bit of the story, but one of the reasons I chose to publish my book was I was terrified. I did not want to get those words out into the open. And I recognized that fear it's a very specific fear. And I talk about it in the book. But whenever that fear of becoming like seen and judged comes up, I know that's the exact place I need to go.
Yeah.
And the more I think about it, the stronger it gets. I know further that's the thing I need to do. And now that I know that particular fear is the evidence of my need for forward movement. Now I slowly go, okay, reluctantly go, okay, I'll move forward. And I gather myself with people who I'll say, listen, I'm really having a difficult time with this. Help me break this down. Help me move this forward. Help keep me accountable, because I need to. I don't want to. And why would I stop my own growth from some nebulous fear that hasn't even happened? And when it does, what does it even mean anyhow?
I really love so something, I don't think this is it. I just looked up rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and that's not it, but there was something that there's this dude on TikTok who has I think he is on the spectrum. I think he has ASD, not ASD. Yeah, autism spectrum disorder as well as ADHD. And something he talks about is sometimes he'll make a TikTok and delete it right after he posts it. And something that he mentions is that he's not necessarily afraid of rejection so much as he's afraid of the feeling, like he's pre-afraid of rejection. Like it's not necessarily so much that like he can't handle rejection. It's that he's like pre-afraid of rejection. And I mean like, and this is like, I feel like this kind of, we've all experienced this, is where we put ourselves out there. How often do we regret actually putting ourselves out there versus the thing that's stopping us from putting ourselves out there is the fear of what will happen if we put ourselves out there, or like how that will go, how that will look, what that entails. But then like the second we do it, it doesn't feel like we're met with more positivity and more I don't know, more acceptance than what we had anticipated. We're almost fearing being rejected by everyone and don't realize that we're going to make somebody feel wanted and welcomed by us. We're going to make somebody like our target audience, specifically the people we're targeting. Like for instance, Ryan, with the people you're targeting with your skincare, with your TikToks, those people, they started following you because there's something that you said that they have been looking for. You gave them an answer that they were looking for. And the stuff that the rejection, the pre-rejection that we feel makes us forget about those things, those moments where people are like, that's what I needed. That's the answer I'm looking for. This guy, he is saying exactly what I needed to hear. And I feel like that's kind of why I don't know why that blocks it out, but I was talking to a gamer friend yesterday. He said that he envies me because I see the world differently in that I will trust first and it will take a pattern of behavior before I stop trusting someone. Whereas he is the opposite, where it'll take a long time for him to start trusting someone. And with what Paul was talking about before, everyone is either judging it off the bat or repressing judgment. And I feel like in a in a in a business mindset, what are we doing for ourselves? Are we prejudging ourselves? Are we judging ourselves right off the bat? Or are we going to sit back and are we going to judge our experience before we even do it and take that step? Or are we going to hold back that judgment and wait till we take that step and see how our target audience is receiving it and then go from there and judge it fairly based off of what needs to happen and assess it and reevaluate as we go?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Judgment, we usually tend to think of externalizing, but we actually do it internally too. And whatever comes out of your mouth travels back into your ears and down into the depths of your soul.
Mhm.
And so if you are casting that judgment on yourself, I was thinking of the old Franklin Delano Roosevelt line, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And that's often what we're doing is we're being afraid of fear. Um, but in so doing, we are telling our soul what reality, the reality that we want it to begin to manufacture. That's why you mentioned earlier about getting into 20,000 other, things to worry about. Your soul is simply obeying the directions you're giving it. You might not be phrasing those words, but the soul infers that from the words that you use, right? This is not a safe world to be in. I'm exposed, I'm compromised, I'm at risk. Okay, well then I'm going to manufacture all sorts of other things to compound to that so that you will do something to move off the ledge. But it's usually not the thing we actually want to do that we find ourselves encouraged to do, right? We find ourselves suddenly encouraged, run away, hide, don't show yourself. When in fact, the opposite is what we're supposed to do, what we need to do.
Yep. I can agree with that. I think to the point of like knowing if you do something, this outcome will likely happen, or having that idea and, being afraid, not simply of what the potential outcome of is, but just of fear is stuff that I've been, tackling to get past. And I feel like I'm moving like little by little, step by step. And as we had found out yesterday, it's not, this effort is not for nothing. Things are happening. It's just, again, like, so this is what I picture, right? And I told Jason about this. It's like when you're in a deep forest and then you look and then you can see over through the horizon, you can see like a huge mountain or a goal or a town that you want or need to get to. And you're in this really thick forest. There's no path, just trees. And you're just like, I can see it right over there. It's right there. And if I just go straight, I can just focus on that and keep moving. But man, everything in front of me is just really dark and confusing looking and things like that. And I think what's happening with me now is like, I'm starting to step through it. Oh, I have a really great story. Here it is. When I was in high school, so I was staying at my friend's house, and there's a huge park, Golden Gate Park, if you're familiar with it. It's probably large. It's just as big as Central Park in San Francisco. And the width of the park is like maybe 5 city blocks. One night, I was leaving my friend's house really late, like around 10 p.m., and it was really dark. When I walked through the park by myself, and there's homeless people in the park, there's animals in the park, and my grandma's house is across the park on the other side. And so when I get to the park, as I'm walking through the park, it's really dark, I'm hearing sounds, and then there's this tunnel in front of me. And I can't see there's no light. There's nothing. It's just a void in this tunnel. And I was like, okay, well, I can go around the tunnel, but who knows? And it's really long. I can go through it. And also it's really dark. I can't see anything. Or I can just go back. And then I decided to myself, I was like, I got to go to my grandma's house. I can't go back to my friends. But I just decide to walk through the tunnel. And it gets to a point where I get basically halfway, and I can't see in front of me, and I can't see behind me. I can't even see my own hands. Like, it's just that dark. And at this point, I'm in the middle of this tunnel, and I'd stopped. I just stopped walking, and I was just like, well, I was like, what do I do now? Like, and I thought to myself, if I started like veering direction, or if I even turned around, I would literally be lost in this tunnel that was literally about 100 feet. But I just decided to keep walking, keep moving. So step by step, I remember these small steps that I was taking because I wasn't really sure what I'd be stepping on, stepping in, stepping into. And eventually I saw a small light that got bigger and bigger. And then I ended up outside the tunnel and eventually to my grandma's house. And so, this conversation has, got me to think about that, because even when you don't know where you are, but you have an idea where you're going, I think where I'm at now is if you just keep going in that direction, even if you're taking small steps that you're comfortable with, you'll eventually end up there as long as you keep going. And then to the point of having people around you, I've been blessed to have you guys, Jason, and the other support friends who support me around, to kind of root me on. So I've been really feeling really good about this journey, and I'm glad we're talking about this, because this is something that I'm sure a lot of people think about as they're starting businesses or venturing out into doing something new.
I've found the most success through the years in getting over this hurdle by being accountable and working with others. When I'm on my own, I tend to respond more negatively or to the potential fear. But when I have somebody else who I know is going to walk that path with me, all of a sudden it becomes a whole lot easier. And to that point, I think to make wrapping this into something that's actionable, so that we understand this mindset, we understand it's common to all of us. It is a massive impediment to a lot of our potential of who we could be and the things that we could do. And many people never move through it. But I think, like you talk about, the thing that stands out for me from your story is, what's the smallest step you can take? If you know that you need to do something, you want to do something, what's the absolute smallest step you could take to move in that direction? And that begins a cycle. I call it the success cycle, or whatever you want to call it, where I take an action, and instead of the worst happening and the house of cards falling down and I'm terrible at failure, it's like, oh, wow, that was successful. And it retrains through experience those negative thoughts and pushes them out, because I am successful. It worked. So it's, hey, I need to send that email. Great. The email's been sent. I need to make that phone call. It's been made. I need to make that video. And when he gets stuck, hey, I know I need to make the video, but what do I talk about? Well, let's talk some things through. Tackle with somebody else. Boom. Now you got 3 or 4 different things you can talk about. Okay, how? What's it going to take to make the video? Well, I just have to video it. Okay, great. Video it and call me. And then what's going to take to edit it? It's going to take 30 minutes. Great. Edit it and call me. Incremental steps rather than just saying, well, I need to make this whole thing. And it becomes a bigger task than it really is, with all of the associated fears, than if it was just broken down into these tiny little milestones, no matter how small they are, with accountability in between, that I got to make that video because somebody's counting on me.
Yeah.
That I think over time, that process can retrain us into just hammering through these things, because we find out that the vast majority of people are not thinking about us at all. And even the people who say that they are not.
Yeah.
Because they're thinking about their own damn lives.
Yeah. I love what you said about both the having accountability with a partner or someone you're going through it with, or as well as the small increments. There's 2 aspects that I've learned with ADHD that have worked that go along with that like make it like really, really bite size. If there's a huge room you need to clean or a huge project you need to do, there's one thing called body doubling, which is my friend used to do this where she used to live. She and her girlfriends would get together and they'd pick a person whose house they would go to that needed to get cleaned. They wouldn't clean it for her. They would sit there and talk to her while she cleaned. There's something about someone being there while you're doing something that helps like motivate you. And it's something, it just really, really, really helps. The other thing was I love what you said about the bite-sized pieces. This is something else that I've learned in my like ADHD groups, is setting the timer for 10 minutes. Don't worry about the rest of the room. Just set a timer for 10 minutes. Just start going. Because when you do like you were saying, that little piece that's going to retrain your mindset, when you start that little piece, odds are it's going to snowball. And you're going to get a high off of the getting something done. Your brain loves that. Your brain loves that accomplishment. There's that thing in the way because it feels too big, too vast to even start, because you feel like you're going to have to sit down and finish this entire Costa Vida salad. And you do not have the stomach for it. Your stomach is just not big enough for it. So you just eat one bite at a time. And you know what? If you need to finish the leftovers tomorrow, you can do that. That's okay. You have a refrigerator at home. You got it. And so it's like those little pieces, set a timer for 10 minutes. Have a friend come over while you're working on it and tell them about what you're doing. Little things like that. Or like Jason said, having someone who's doing something similar. So they kind of they're on the journey with you. And I love that you mentioned, Ryan, that you had like a really good support system. Oh, that's everything. People who are cheering you on, like your friends and family who know what's going on with you and know the goals that you're working towards. That's everything. Like having those cheerleaders, having those people who know you and who are making sure that you feel supported in your journey. That does so much.
Yeah, I feel pretty blessed, to be honest. So yeah, a lot of this stuff is in my head and working through it. But luckily for me, I have people around me that can hold me accountable or cheer me on. But yeah, it's funny though. I can only imagine how many other people are in the same position times, even whether they're starting out or they've established something or they're running something or managing something. I can only imagine like getting out of your comfort zone. I mean, this is ultimately what we're talking about. It's like getting out of your comfort zone in certain things and moving beyond that.
The other thing that comes to mind for me, Ryan, is that, the market is going to be a barometer for how successfully you communicate your message and how much value they find in the product that you're offering. That's the truth about business, yes. But at the same time, you are exposing yourself to their blowback to their vitriol and their venom and all of that. And you're doing it the right way because you're first running it through the ringer with people who care about you and are friends. An old mentor of mine used to say, it's better to be beaten up by your friends than by the market first, right? Because your friends will do it with a soft hand. The market will just coldly ignore you, right? Or they'll turn and spew venom on you. But here's the thing, and I think we talked about this the last time we were all together. We were talking more about the inner critic, but I think it's also useful for the outer critic. And that is the old quote from, what's his name? The guy who survived Dr. Viktor Frankl. He said, between the stimulus and the response, we retain the power to choose. And so just because somebody levels an accusation or a negative comment or shoots, some arrow at you, doesn't mean you automatically have to respond to it or react to it. I wouldn't necessarily suggest keeping silent, but you don't have to absorb it full stop inside your system. You can sort of play with it a little bit. You can say, I'm interested to hear more about that. Can you share more about that? And that will immediately begin to separate people who are just full of hate from people who are actually frustrated, but could potentially be won over. Because you have not automatically judged the way they have. Instead, you've suspended your judgment. But you haven't internalized what they're saying, because you don't have to. There's no law anywhere that says just because somebody says something to you means you have to believe it or accept it or be put down by it. You retain the power at all times to say, well, like that could sting pretty hard if I took it inside. Luckily, I'm not obligated to. I know you said it, but I'm not swallowing it.
I really love what you were talking about earlier, Paul, is when you were talking about how when people criticize, but there's the different criticisms. There's a judgment where it's like, oh, that's bad, you're a bad person. And then there's the one where it's like, here's what I would do differently. They're actually problem solving. And I think when it comes to criticism or feedback, that's kind of something that I take more seriously. If it's someone who's just in it for the insult about what I'm doing, they don't have anything valuable to say. That's not anything valuable. Just sharing their emotions and acting as if I need to change what I'm doing based off of their emotions, that's crap. That's not going to hold any water. But if it has like a problem solved with it, oh, here's something that rubbed me the wrong way, and here is something and it might offend other people as well. Here's a way you could do it that might affect it differently. And that you don't get, again, with what you're saying, Paul, like not like reacting to it immediately. I think it's really important to, like what you were saying, ruminate on it for a second. Just let it sit there and see, okay, is there some truth to that? If I do that, will it hinder or hurt my mission, what I'm trying to accomplish? Because sometimes people, they might have this feedback and have a problem solved for it, but they might not understand your mission the way that you do. And so ultimately you take it and you have to like ruminate with it for a second. And if they have some good feedback and it's not going to hurt the mission, if you can see how it would help your mission, that's where to take it seriously. And that's where it can become a conversation. It's something that I've talked to my husband about this multiple times. Well, it seems like when someone has an opinion, you can, if there's something that you are working on, like a team that you have, that you and the other person are in the team, no one else is allowed to have a say in that. And no one else can think that they have a say in it. Yes, they want to feel heard, but it should never be like, oh, I'm going to go talk to the other person, because if you're like, oh, that's a good point, I'm going to go talk to the other person, and it doesn't end up happening, that person thinks it was the other person that said no, and they think that they have a say in it. They think that they have a say in your team or in your mission. And so it's very important to be like, I'm going to think about that. Never talk about, oh, yeah, I'm going to go talk to so-and-so, or, oh, I'm going to implement that, or I'm like, don't make any promises. Say, I'll think about it. Like that needs to be, they need to feel heard, but they can't feel like they get to sway you in your mission. So it's important to have those boundaries there too.
So we've got about 10 minutes left here in this workshop. Couple things uh, that I'm hearing. Number one is, common issue we all have, some sort of nebulous fear out there, and usually it's has something to do with I'm going to be exposed and people aren't going to love me. The second part of that is that since it is all common to all of us, we all have something that we feel that we should be marching toward, and we all encounter the resistance in that. So finding a marching buddy is very important. Now, Naomi, you mentioned the subtle art of not giving a fuck as Mark's book. It's a great book. One of the things that he calls out in there, which is also called out in another great book called The Power of the Other, is this idea that there are some people who bring you forward. It's the energy that lights up the room. You walk in and they're clapping for you. And then there are the other people who, on the other side of it, just bring you down. And every time you want to move forward, they're here to tell you and remind you how difficult it's going to be. And are you sure that you want to? There is something very valuable about curating the people that we hang around with, because we need to be in charge of the people who we surround ourselves with, and surround ourselves with the people who we become energized. It's not that they always adore us or like our ideas, agree with us. That's not the point. The point is, am I becoming a better all-around thinker? Am I a better evaluator of my own self? Am I seeing a greater or better truth in wherever I'm supposed to be headed? Or when I talk to this person, is the life sucked out of me and I feel like I got to drum up more energy? Because when we get together, we really should be energizing one another in whatever it is that we're doing. So as we close out, what I do want to do, as I want to do with all these workshops, is let's turn this into something that, what's our takeaway for today? So today, I think, what is the thing in front of you, and what's the most basic thing that you could do today to move toward whatever that vision is? What's the path where you're headed, and what's the most basic thing you can do to move forward? Be thinking about that. We'll go around in just a second to answer what that is for each of us. All right, I'll start. As I've talked to each one of you about this whole thing, it's becoming pretty clear in my head, the idea of really focusing entrepreneurs into three different categories: the watchers, the people who watch here, the people who engage and they join in sprints, and then building an accelerator on top of that, and formalizing that accelerator. And I've been resistant to that, and I need to let off the reins on the resistance and start moving forward. So to that end, I've announced that, even to the guy who joined yesterday, Santiago. He's pretty excited about it. And then I did feed that back into John, who's a member in the community here, and got a little bit of feedback from him. And then I've started making some phone calls to some other folks to figure out what the formal structure that could be. So that's I'm removing the resistance and reaching out to people who, as they come to my mind, who I think could be part of solidifying that.
Yeah, in my case, Jason, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. It isn't so much fear as it is a track record of putting myself out there in one context or another and hearing nothing. Which really, if you just think about it for a moment, is I'm either talking to the wrong people or sending the wrong message or both. It's got nothing to do with the fact that I'm a lousy human being or don't have anything valuable to say. That's absolutely not true. But in everybody's journey, there are hurdles. I've done a personal brand networking. I did it for 6 years and did pretty well with it, just organically, often by accident, just by trying stuff out. Well, you can do that for a while, but eventually it becomes old hat. And then the question is, what is the next level of communicating? And it's taken me from the end of that time, 5 years into my journey, to realize I just haven't done the homework about how do I get really good at communicating the messages I do have. And so in the conversation Jason and I had yesterday, I said, I'm starting to, these talks that I want to give are starting to crystallize in terms of what they're going to be about. Now, what I really need to do is have you interview me about them so that I can get that stuff out of my system and then begin to repurpose it into content. So for me, it hasn't been like, I'm not afraid to go and get on Facebook. I'm just like, what's the point? Nobody's going to listen. I don't care if people get angry. I'm like, go ahead. I don't even read the comments. But if nobody says anything and it just goes, crickets, I'm like, and then I've wasted 5 minutes of my life that I could have been doing something else, which just goes back to that thing. I've got to do my homework about becoming a more advanced communicator than I currently am.
All right, cool. Thanks. Anybody else?
Well, considering that, considering what we've been talking about, I think, again, just little steps. Yesterday, I went ahead and created a Twitter account or an X account, whatever they call it now. And I think when I created a video, a short video for that I posted on my TikTok and that account. So I think next is today, I'm going to create like a Instagram and Threads account and maybe create another video. I really want to just get in a cadence of creating more videos. I think Jason, we talked about trying to create like 2 videos a day or something like that. And I want to get to a point where I can do that. And I'm just knocking them out, not getting them within it too much in my head, but I do want to come up with some new ideas for content just so I can have more things to talk about. So I think that's going to be my focus today and this week.
Awesome. Thanks.
I think for me, something that I'm wanting to do is also get on and post more. And one of my holdbacks has been, again, my image and not wondering if it's going to be received well because of the norm, I guess, for right now, what's on social media. And something that the bite-sized chunk that I'm going to do is I want to start getting in front of the camera like this, without putting on any foundation, no cover up, no foundation, just me, just raw, real. And because the people that I want to reach out to are the people who are going to hear authenticity. So I want to focus on that goal more and showing up the way that I want people to feel accepted as.
Wow. That's awesome. See, everybody's got a thing. And I just want to recognize for all of us, we are much harder on ourselves than anyone is on us. So give yourself a break. At the end of my TikToks last year, for whatever reason, it slipped off my tongue at one point in time. And I said, hey, be your best friend today. So for all of us, what would it be like to be our best friend today? How much more compassionate would we be? How much more earnest would we be in moving our lives forward if we could walk with our best friend? And turns out we do. So this is the Tuesday workshop. Reach out to somebody today who needs to hear a good message. And I look forward to seeing you all on the community at thinkergrowth.com. Bye, everybody.
Ciao now.
Have a good one.